So I'm not sure how much Peko has told you about what I'm looking into, but yeah, as I told you, honestly, I have no idea where is my exact focus yet, but I'm interested to look into the relationship between the law and design and how one affects the other one and vice versa. So to just like simplify it through some examples, within product design, for example, when a product is made, then it starts creating its own law, so such as a car or an airplane. So when these two products were formed, they started like creating their own laws in many ways, and then those laws began to create their own byproducts. So what do I mean by this? So let's say car as a product, it created a certain form of law. So for example, for monitoring or for health and safety, like as far as I see it, this is like the two main categories that I've discovered so far. That then those laws began to make their own designs. So for example, the zebra crossing line or the stoplights or the number plate. And in the case of number plates, I find it really weird because the user never uses it unless they lose their car or their car gets stolen. So I just started picking one by one, like everyday item that was created due to a consequence from the law, or perhaps it created a law as the consequences of the product. So I'm really like still looking into each side of this argument. So like how one creates the other one and how the other one reacts and creates or directs the creation of the other one. But it doesn't necessarily need to be physical. So it doesn't need to be a product. And so in like an example of a non-product, in 2004 or 2008, I'm not sure, in Europe, there was a law that passed regarding the waste created by different producers. And the law said that the producers need to take care of their own waste. So if Sony is producing a TV, they need to deal with the electronic waste of that. And off topic, e-waste is one of the like lasting objects ever. Like apparently it lasts for 5 million years or something. But that's a different topic. And the thing I'm interested in is that when they set this law, instead of Sony or Panasonic or whatever the brand is, instead of them dealing with the situation and starting to design their artifacts in a way, in a manner that it could be deassembled and deconstructed to be able to actually recycle them, companies began to form and businesses got formed that got paid to deal with the waste. So this is what I'm interested in, to see how a law could create design or direct design, and how design can create or direct laws. And since you're from US, a better example of this would be the Delaware situation, when a law was formed that every business need to have an official address. But instead of that, business got formed that they sold address to other business. So I feel like I'm talking too much and I didn't let you say anything about this, but this is generally what I'm interested in.
Mhm. Great. It's very, very interesting component. Basically, you're referencing the whole interaction between law and the marketplace and the free economy, etc., which is very, very interesting. The first thing that I'll say, and I wouldn't mind backing up and going through like desired outcomes and having a broader plan. But the first thing I'll say in terms of just your project is that in my book, there's many different types of law.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the context of the way that you're talking about it, I would actually put, a slight, not complete, but a slight separation between basically you have law in the context of like for example, constitutional law, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm mostly interested, because constitutional law that involves like the whole perspective of like the Declaration of Independence, like pre-constitutional law,
Yeah.
that is owned by the people, right? And it's very hard to basically take it over, right? But when you get into the kind of laws that you're talking about, basically whoever has the money, whoever has control of the court systems, whoever has like basically ability to influence, has the power.
Yeah.
Right? So then you have basically, I guess you have court law, right? So there's constitutional law, there's court law, which is basically money and power, and there's pre-constitutional law. And so the best way that I like to look at law is that the two primary categories in terms of just like not like actual law, but like just in the perspective of it would be laws that guide, right? So guiding laws, and then you have policies, protocols, and basically implementation of the law.
Yeah.
So in that context, for me, like the root laws, like the foundation of law, created by legislators,
Yeah.
is very, very different than the implementation of law. So an example of that, I think the easiest example of that would be the University of California at Santa Cruz, the University of California. So the University of California, I don't know if you got this document that I'm writing in, but I sent it to you. Wait, no, I didn't send it.
Cheers.
Totally send it to you really quick, so you have direct access to it. So the University of California has 10 campuses, and it's huge. It's one of the biggest university systems in the world, and it is literally a fourth branch of government of it's in the California Constitution.
Wow.
And it's in the California Constitution. And so it basically the Board of Regents oversees its own laws and its own systems, right? It's like completely controlled separately from the rest of the government. And the way that they do it is the Board of Regents, which would be the legislature, creates laws that are really like summary paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty short, basically, and they know what they're voting on. They know what they're doing, and then from there, the office of the president. So it's the University of California Office of the President. So this would be like the executive.
Yeah.
Basically takes that and they turn it into detailed policies and implementation protocol. So from there, basically, what you end up with is you have a guiding principle of what the law is supposed to do, and then you have an infinitely complex implementation of the law to the best of the ability that people are able to do it. What happens, for example, in the United States with the Congress, the law is typically not written by the legislature.
That's weird.
Well, typically it's written by staff, lobbyists, and other external organizations, right?
Yeah.
And then the legislatures approve it. But a single bill, like a bill, can be 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
1,000 pages plus, right? So really, what happens is that they begin the process of implementing, of approving the implementation systems within the bills themselves. So a bill can be a foundational law and the implementation together in a single bill.
That's in the case it passes, right?
Yeah, in the case that it passes,
Yeah.
But it gets very, very convoluted and crazy because no congressperson is going to read 1,000 pages. So the actual legislatures have no idea what they're passing and what they're actually agreeing to, and so it's just very, very confusing. So you get these. You usually get what's called a bill summary, and this is really the real law, right? It's like what is the interpretation the interpretation of the bill being passed.
So you're saying the legislators just read the summary of the bill rather than the whole bill?
Exactly. Nobody reads. I mean, some of these bills can be, 5,000, 10,000 pages long, right? And it's just, there's no possible way that every legislature reads the actual laws that they're passing. It's just impossible. And it's ridiculous. They shouldn't even be doing that. Like, you should have, like, for me, the vision of law by people, where actual normal people are in charge of their own legal systems, is that basically individuals are always writing law in the context that it should be, one, readable by normal everyday people, and therefore it should be very short, concise, clear, simple, and it should be overview of the foundation of what the Constitution allows and the legislature allows in creating law. Should be like the foundation, and then everything's built off that. So there needs to be a division between the creation of legal parameters and the actual law itself, and then the implementation of the law. And so implementation and protocols and policies can be infinitely complex. And many times what a law does is it empowers an agency. For example, let's take the car example that you talked about.
Yeah.
The law empowers agencies. So with the car, it empowers the DMV here. So this is the Department of Motor Vehicles. And so the Department of Motor Vehicles is then able to create the policies and implementation of the law in regards to, license plates and stop signs, stoplight, right? So in that context, like, I would put a separation between the implementation of law and the policies and protocols that oversee that implementation and the actual foundational law itself. And so you're kind of mixing those two together, and it is a blurry line. I mean, there's no direct context of it. And what I really love about your theory and your hypothesis is the concept that, real law affects people on a day-to-day basis, right?
Sure.
People on a day-to-day basis. And so real law is the implementation.
As I see, like, the system is like very different from the UK's, but it's interesting because they definitely have a lot of cross sections with each other.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, in my perspective, parliaments work, a little differently and similarly, but overall, anywhere you go in the world, because lawyers are so empowered, they typically, it's just very, very confusing and convoluted, and it's very hard to understand any basic legal paperwork, whether it's coming out of a parliament or a Congress or wherever. So, but overall, it's all very simple. I mean, I've certainly read over the guiding documents of the EU. I haven't done too much of Parliament in terms of, but I have looked into Spain systems because that's where I have connections, right? So, but yeah, it's definitely. But I really like the idea that, like, if you ignore the actual written law, right? If you ignore the written law, how law affects people's actual lives on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly.
Is very, very flexible. And when we talk about technology, one of the biggest legal things that's happening right now that's like in people's face here in California.
In what way?
Is so new law in California is self-driving cars. So every single day, every day I see self-driving cars on the road.
Oh, so they're already out in California.
But they're not. That's what's so interesting about it. So what happens is that, I mean, I'm like I'm in the radius of Google, right? And so you have Google cars, and so it's like it's not legal, but they are on the road, basically on like a trial basis, right? They're learning the systems of how the cars function, right? So you have cars on the road that are self-driving cars. They're getting in accidents. they're having problems. They're also doing what they can to learn the whole systems and get better. So they're learning. But in the end, it's really interesting because they haven't created the legal systems and parameters to deal with self-driving cars. The other one you have is Tesla. So Tesla already has multiple cases. They have what's called, it's not a self-driving car, but it's basically an automated, they have two systems. They have automated lane cruising, right? And they also have automated emergency. And there's been at least one or two cases, 1 to 2 cases of people hitting the emergency button and the car takes them directly to the hospital.
I see.
I mean, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
that you can push a button in a Tesla and it'll take you to the nearest hospital, right?
I didn't know about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like this is already happening and it's not legal, right? So the law is interacting with the technology in a way where it's not illegal, but it's not legal. So really, in many ways, what we're talking about is what I bring up a lot, and a lot of people talk about is the gray area of law. Gray area. Another gray area would be medical marijuana. Medical marijuana, where you have state law and federal law are different. So you have this gray area of the law. So it's basically anywhere of the law where you don't have a clear of what is supposed to happen based on the emergence of technology or the creation of different types of laws in local jurisdictions. And that would be the gray area of the law, which is for me the most important part of the law. I mean, that's why people want to get advice from lawyers and things like that. Of course, we don't do legal advice, and this is just a general discussion, but it's just very, very the foundation of why the legal profession is so popular is because of the gray area. What can you get around and do, even though it may not be legal? There's always a way to figure it out and make it happen.
But that's this case I think is like specific for UK, right? Because since it's just like state law and then federal law, which I think federal law would win every time, wouldn't they?
But no, not necessarily. Federal law doesn't necessarily win every time.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the reason why is because in the United States we aren't a single normal country. It's technically organized a little bit more like the European Union, right? So each individual state is fully empowered as an autonomous state and holds all the power of everything that's not dictated within the Constitution.
And I forgot to ask you, in terms of the Google car that you talked about, is the test being carried out by an agency who's like investigating this new technology and product, or is that just Google?
Yeah, Google is doing all the testing themselves.
And is there an agency that tests out this new technology that comes to market to regulate them? And
no, I mean in the United States, everything is more or less regulated by the corporations, and they do a lot of their own testing. So, for example, oh man, what is this agency called? I think it's it's either the Bureau of Agriculture or maybe it's the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency. Federal Drug Enforcement Agency. I don't know. It might be. I think it's the FDA, Federal Drug Agency. I don't know. Anyways, the FDA does testing, right? It has to approve testing, of all federally sold products, anything, right? So anything and everything that is going to be like food, medicine, anything that's people are going to be interacting, it has to be approved by the FDA. Oh yeah, the Food and Drug Administration. That's it. So this might not include like merchandise that you don't eat or whatever. But the point is that they the way that it works these days is that corporations pay for their own testing, and many times do it themselves or pay a company to do it that works for them.
All right. So
So
this
that's
implemented.
so it's basically if they need a third party, they can pay a third party that they may already own. I mean, it's just a, you know, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. I mean, that is not a good system. I'm sure in Europe it's done a little differently.
Well, I don't know about the whole Europe, but in UK it's definitely done differently, and it's not that better, I guess. But it has its own strange things. So when I was looking into, first of all, how a bill could be introduced, apparently a person could never introduce a law unless they own a really big business. So apparently there's three different types of bills here. The first one is just like a type that is suggested by the government and carried out by them. The second one is called a private bill, which in this case is the thing you're saying with the implementation law, I guess. It relates to that a bit more, where the business wants to create something, and therefore it introduces this bill, and it's called a private bill. And when that intersects with everyday people, they call it a hybrid bill. And in this case, I find it really interesting because uh, a person could introduce a bill only in the case he owns a business or he's a lord. So it is a matter of money, as you say here as well. But I never knew that it's different and it separates from constitutional laws.
Is
So
so the three types are suggested by the government, the private bill and the hybrid bill. Those are the three types.
yeah,
Cool.
and what I'm interested in is that could you then point out to me how perhaps constitutional laws uh, created or directed their own designs, or perhaps the design has managed in any field to perhaps create a constitutional law? Because if you look at it like just an example within the body of architecture, here in UK we have the laws for a smoke detector and a fire exit to exist within a building. And at this point, I'm a bit confused if that would be a constitutional law or would that be an implementation of the law.
Say that last part again. The fire in a building.
So, for example, within architecture, like if you're building a building, your thing needs to have a smoke detector, a carbon monoxide detector, and a fire exit. And there's plenty more things that are being established to this day. So the newest one is a law about balconies and how big they need to be, or there's many other things around it, like the space you need within the hall or things like that. So my question is, would this go within the body of constitutional laws, or would it be an implementation of the law?
I mean, for me, that would go in the implementation of the law, right? And it all depends on what type of constitution that organization has. So, you know, you can talk about like, okay, here's another. It's a bad, terrible example. You know, I'll just give it. I'll just go straight into the issue because I don't have a great example for it, but. You can have a constitution that's ridiculously long. So, for example, in California, our constitution is 80,000 words.
Yeah,
That's just insane. So the Constitution of the United States is about 9,000 words.
mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Constitution of the European Union is much longer because it's so complex. And really, the Constitution of the European Union is not even a constitution; it's a set of treaties, which makes it even more confusing. But I don't know about UK, but the point is that you can put anything you want into the Constitution, right? But it doesn't mean that it's constitutional law just because it's in the Constitution. I would question that. So in the context of law by people, where we're actually trying to create an understanding of how law functions in a way that actual normal everyday people can understand, the divisions that I like to do are so you would have pre-constitutional law, which we talked about, and this is owned by the people, right? Only the people, empowers the government, and then you have the Constitution, Constitution, and then basically you have the primary law, right? So what's so important about and then you have implementational law. So what's so important about the primary law and its relationship to the implementational law that doesn't happen, that needs to happen, is that
Yeah.
every single law and every single thing should be able to be traced back to the Constitution, right? So everything, every law, every implementational policy should be able to be traced back.
So in the case of loopholes, is
Exact
this the case when the
application.
constitutional law is not met due to a crossing a boundary of the implementation of the law? Is that where the loopholes are created?
Loopholes are always created within the implementation, typically, right? So you and remember the other loophole, which is really important, is court law. So court law is basically just money and power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the money and power, you can do whatever you want to because the court system, whatever the court in the United States, at least, whatever the court says is law, period. So it doesn't matter if the court is wrong. Whatever the court decides is the legal application of the law, which is the law. So in that context, the law can be completely, and this is how it actually works. The law can have completely different ramifications to different classes of people and different types of people based on the color of their skin or the amount of money they have or their jobs they have or whatever they did in that particular situation. And it's still the law. So the law never affects all people the same in its actual implementation.
So it could like go against its own written words?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
It happens all the time, especially in the United States. So one judge will do something totally different from another judge, will do something totally different from another judge. It just all depends on each particular situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So overall, the goal of the legal system is to be fair more often than it is wrong, right? To be right more often than it is wrong and have justice and be fair. But the system is set up in a way that in any one particular case, any one particular court, battle, anything can happen, right? There's no guarantee that any particular court battle is going to go in the right direction based on what's happened before. But overall, when you look at, every single court battle, you get a majority of them going in the right direction based on just the ability to correct mistakes.
True.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of, what happens. But going back to what you were talking about, it's like right now it's very hard to look at a law. Like basically what happens is that the Constitution empowers the legislature to make laws, and the legislature just makes laws randomly. And they don't actually usually trace back their power to make those laws based on the Constitution. Many times legislatures take their power beyond the Constitution, right? That basically the Constitution enables them to make laws, and so therefore they can make whatever law they want to, regardless of anything else. Like that's kind of the direction that we've been going. And I feel that it's very, very, difficult to track anything and to understand it for normal people without it being, actually tied to something. I mean, why are they making these laws? What is the foundation of it? So another way of looking at it is bylaws. Let's look at something a lot simpler, because when we get into this huge, crazy, constitutional law, everything is really big and broad.
Yeah.
A much better way to look at it is corporate law, right? Corporate law. And the best way to look at a government is like a really, really big, like the biggest of all corporations. So corporate law is a really great, small micro experience you can play with. So with corporate law, at least in the United States, you have by law, you have a owners or shareholders that appoint the board, and then the board is in essence the legislature, and the board creates the policies and appoints the executives, right?
Yeah.
The executives implement the goals of the company. So it's kind of like a little microcosm of the whole system within a corporation. And for me, the foundation to a democracy, like I'm all about democracy. In technology, you actually get a lot of people who aren't about democracy. So I'm about, one vote, one person, right? And creating equality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also about participatory democracy, like equal vote, equal voice, right? So in a democratic system, for me to have a truly democratic society, we need to bring democracy into our organizations. And it's very, very hard to find people who are willing to function on an organizational level with democracy. Like everybody always, are working so hard. We need democracy for the world. But then, okay, well, let's operate democratically. Like, oh, no, we can't do that, right? So anyways, I could go off on that, how weird it is that people don't function democratically and all our corporations are basically dictatorships.
Mm-hmm.
or they're like basically set up as oligarchies. But anyways, beyond that, the board makes all the policies and procedures. So this is basically like the electorate, or the citizens, right? And then the board is basically like the legislature, and the executives implement all the policies and goals. So what the foundational component of the board is the bylaws. The bylaws is basically like the Constitution, right? And the Articles of Incorporation is kind of like the Declaration of Independence, right? And this is declaring independence from the individual owners, right? Because corporations are by definition their own independent entities separate from their owners, unlike a partnership, where partnerships, the actual partnership is the owners. So so the bylaws is the Constitution, and if you look at bylaws, they're typically very, very short, very, very short. Sometimes as little as 3 to 5 pages, but definitely 10 to 20 pages max, right? Mm-hmm. So your bylaws create the entire context of how the board can create, in essence, law and policies, and then the executives of the company oversee the implementation of the policies, protocols, and other aspects of the bylaws, right? So basically the implementation of the bylaws. So in that context, you can actually see a direct connection of every single product, every single component of a corporation going from the actual bylaws and the legal construct that empowers the board to make decisions into the implementation of all the policies and protocols based on every single legal issue that relates to every single product. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good place to see that interaction between and for me that it is law. I mean, corporations are bigger than entire countries at this point, right? So the actual systems of how a corporation functions, which I would say should be way more democratic, influence what the law is. Like what a corporation says and the policies and protocols of the corporation directly determine what the application of the law will be, outside of the context of a legislature. So in that context, and this I think relates to your studies a lot. And you see that everywhere from like Apple and Google, and how many governments are reliant on Google, right? And also all the communication systems of Apple and AT&T, and getting access to the phones, etc., in investigations when it comes to safety and terrorist threats, things like that. But I think it's important to think of corporations as extensions of the law. Like the corporate code of a legislature, the corporate code of the government empowers the legislature to be an extension of the law.
Mm-hmm. But in the end, it will be an implementation, no law, not a constitutional one.
Yes, of course. But again, that's what affects people's lives.
True.
And so for me, if I got my way, I would institute. Well, I'm all about I won't go into community equity and everything, but I would institute a system where basically all corporations would need to function democratically, or at least get major tax rewards for functioning democratically. That corporations get big tax benefits for functioning democratically. And the only way to have a democratic society is to have your organizational institutions function democratically.
Mm-hmm.
That it doesn't make sense to say that we're a democracy, yet our everyday lives, we never vote, we never are involved in decision making, we just are told what to do. It's not a democracy,
Yeah.
Anyways, that's getting a little bit off topic, but I think it's applicable in the context of understanding how corporations function, but it's also applicable to any organization, that wants, and how people interact. Like in the interaction with you, I would love to make decisions, with a group and build on how we function ourselves.
So like technically what you're telling me is that when it, like, obviously the law is always one step behind of technology, and it needs to be introduced first for them to be able to govern it in any way. But as I understand, in US, these new technologies are governed by the same company that produced it in the beginning. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
So like the governing of the new things that come out is not carried out by the agencies from the government, but it's from the producers themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the burden of proof is on the company to simply prove to the government that its product is safe.
So let's say,
as long as the company can show proof that the product is safe, the government can sign off on it.
I see. And yeah, if
So
it's
there's
okay,
no need. So the FDA or any government institution or agency can always force a company to get third-party verification, but it doesn't have to.
I see.
It can always make problems for companies to be like, no, we don't think this is safe. We want more studies. We want more of this. We want more of that. But the way that it's set up is that the actual bar is simply, in the court of the corporation to simply, prove that it's safe. If the government accepts the proof, no third party need be involved.
That's very interesting, because I was thinking, I was wondering if, like for the end of my project, I would like to investigate if I could intentionally create a law by creating something. So through designing a specific thing, whatever it might be, I don't know yet, could I intentionally create a law? And I was wondering if the law could intentionally create products. But since you're telling me the regulators of those products, the companies who produce them themselves, it's more easier to imagine that could happen, that someone could intentionally pass a certain thing to be able to have a certain thing exist with our everyday life.
Yeah, definitely. There's two things I wanted to mention. I'm just going to go back so I don't forget it. And that is in the United States and California, the way that representative democracy works has a system where only representatives can start laws, right? So if you're going to have a law in the legislature, that law has to be presented by an elected representative. But we have this other thing, which it's not on the federal level. So at the federal level, the only way to implement or to propose a law is through your representative. There's no other way to do it. But on the state level, there's probably a minority of states, but about half of them allow the direct proposition where any individual can get enough signatures to put something on the ballot, right? Where like it would be a ballot referendum. And that can be done directly by the people. So that's a way that people can create laws directly. And in California, there's two levels. There's constitutional amendments, which are direct constitutional amendments of the law, and that it takes a lot more signatures. It's like double the number of signatures. And then you have just normal implementational law, which is like half the number of signatures, probably about, between 100 and 300,000, depending on the year, signatures that you have to get the new law on the ballot, and then the people would have to vote on it. And
That's
depending
such a small number, though, considering the population of US. That's very small.
Yeah, it's 5% of the voting population, and because so few people vote, it's a lot lower than it probably should be. So, if everybody voted, it would probably end up being about 500,000 to 1,000,000 signatures.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about 5% of the population. And there's 35 million, 30 million people. So
yeah, sorry, I cut you. Go on.
The other thing I was going to mention is that almost all of the rich billionaires and, especially people like Halliburton and oil companies, all of these, super buco billionaires, every single one of them can basically be traced back to a law in the context that the law and the implementation of the law is favorable to a specific corporation, right? So, you're utilizing your power because you've basically, control the government, or at least control enough of the government to pass laws that are favorable for your business. And so you basically are creating these monopoly systems of, for example, government defense contracts, where you have people both on the inside of the government and the outside of the government. So the laws create the markets and create the ability to make ungodly amounts of money. So like when Halliburton gets contracts to go into Iraq and makes, hundreds of billions of dollars on building, defense contracts in Iraq, and overseeing all the contractors that then the U.S. government pays for. That's how they make their endless billions of dollars. So they're just on both sides of the law. That they're literally using the law to create markets to make and just give the taxpayer money back to the billionaires.
And it happens openly.
No, it all happens, covertly and behind closed doors. It's just there's really no way to make endless gobs of billions of dollars without, the law coming first, right? The law comes first. It creates the market that allows that to happen. I guess another example could potentially be the tech industry. The tech industry is still to this day in California and the United States under subsidy law. So it's one of the newest economies. It's like 30, 40 years old. And what was created and the whole laws that support the tech industry, it was all subsidized, and it was all basically created in a way that they would have major tax deductions and loopholes to support the tech industry to make it big, right? Basically, what that means these days is that the current model for the tech industry is, and you see it with Google all the time, you create a product, you give it away for free for years and years and years until everybody is hooked on it. And then you drive all the competition out, you create a monopoly, and then and only then you drive up the price or use marketing to actually make endless gobs of millions of dollars on it. So what that creates is a system that's very easily it's so backwards in any type of open market system. It's a closed market system, right? You would never create that as a market system if you had major taxes and no way to do that. So they're utilizing the subsidies and all of these startup loopholes to basically in the fact that only mega millionaires and billionaires could be able to put endless hundreds of millions of dollars and lose all of that money before they would ever recoup the money. And that's how technology works these days. And it's very silly to me. I'm actually anti-corporate cannibalism. I think corporate cannibalism is one of the worst things for our society. Because how does a corporation like Google gobbling up thousands and thousands of other corporations, how does that help everyday individual people? In any way whatsoever? There's no benefit to everyday normal people for huge, massive corporations to gobble up thousands and thousands of other smaller corporations and have them basically disappear. And typically what you end up with, and the way that our legal systems are working with all the loopholes and subsidies, is that the whole purpose of companies these days is to not create a good product. It has nothing to do about the product. It's all about imaging, branding, and creating the image that you are valuable, and that people are using you or whatever.
That's
And
a whole
then
other
the
topic.
goal is simply to sell out. That's
Yeah,
always the goal. There's no goal in actually creating a quality product that will last, or creating a company that you have any intention of building to be successful. It's all about selling out as fast as possible for as much money as possible, create as big a facade as possible, and basically fake that you are the most important company, even though you literally have nothing. you know?
yeah,
And then you get bought out, and most of the time the reason they buy you out has nothing to even do about your product. They literally are buying you out for,
the image. Yeah,
well, not
that's
even
right.
just the image, but just the monopoly,
Hmm.
right? They don't, even the potential that you might compete against them is the anti of their marketing plan. The entire tech marketing plan is monopoly based, right? So you don't want to have any competition, period. So they just buy out all the competition. It's very, very strange, like what's happening. And I think it's a huge detriment to our society that we're actually losing any quality, any like the whole design systems, and designing longer based on quality.
Hmm. Um, so if it's okay, I would like to bring us back to the part where you were saying the products are actually need to be approved, that they're safe to the government to be able to like come to the market, which I thought is different because I've seen many products coming into the market and then becoming illegal or perhaps governed or regulated, like old school
Yes, yes. So the
example of it
key.
would be a cigarette,
Oh,
and a more new example would be like
I
a
mean,
Uber.
cigarettes used to be marketed by doctors. So when cigarettes first came out, there would actually be doctors that told you that it was good for you, and that you
Hmm.
would smoke. Like, people literally would get addicted to cigarettes because their doctor prescribed it to them.
Yeah.
And so it was crazy. So in that context, yes, cigarettes were 100% approved by the government to be sold before
Oh,
they were
before.
marketed in that way. But in the context, in alcohol is another similar example where it existed before the government existed to regulate it, right?
Hmm.
And tobacco is really similar to that. But in the context of anything that's not consumable in the United States does not have to be approved. So
Hmm.
only products that you would eat or like medicine have to
Yeah,
be.
I see.
Yeah,
So
and even then, so if I want to do a bake sale and I want to sell cookies, I can go sell cookies. I don't have to get approved. I don't have to approve my cookies to be
yeah,
sold, right? Only cookies in general have to be approved. But if you created a new food or a new organism, that a new plant or whatever, it has to be approved. So genetically modified organisms, for example, have to be approved before they can be brought to market.
hmm,
But if I'm going to create a product that isn't consumed or anything, like a car, for example, there's no approval other
needed.
than the other types of regulations. So if you create a new technology, a new online technology, an internet website, whatever, there's no need for approval.
So as long as like they they kind of show to the government that you won't die using this car, they could pass that on to the market, as I understand. But what I'm interested in is that
And
where.
again, it can be the same thing where, like, it only comes up if it's a safety issue. So
Mhm.
you can launch a product, start selling it, and
Yeah,
then it can start showing that it's really dangerous, right? And
yeah.
there's the recalls, all the problems. Yeah.
And then is the business of the same company who produced it to come up with the regulations and the proposed laws to regulate this product to make it more safe. So for example, when the car was produced, was it the companies who had to come up with the idea of a number plate and the idea of a stoplight, the signs, and so on? The whole like it's a whole culture developed around this one product, if you think of it. And so I was most interested to see if this is based on a governmental thing, or is it just as I understand, the company who need to develop this to be able to have their products functioning within the society.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like the chicken before the egg question.
Oh shit.
I mean, I would, my assumption, and obviously we can do more research on this. This is a really good. The question is almost the most important part, right? To lay out the question as perfectly as possible.
Yeah.
But obviously, in the chicken before the egg issue, it's in some ways it's kind of like both.
Mm-hmm.
The way that a lawyer would speak, and I'm not favorable of lawyer talk, is that you would never propose or implement an unfavorable law. So the company's interest is to be as unregulated as possible. So the
Yeah.
interest of the company is to be as unregulated as possible, right? That is always the best position for the company to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So what would happen is that the company may propose law. So the company may propose law specifically for the reason to reduce regulation, right? So if the company didn't do anything, if the company does nothing, right,
Mm-hmm.
and the government will see the new issues and problems and start regulating,
Mm-hmm.
right? And basically do it their way, third party externally.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be potential for both big and unknown regulations, right? But if the company comes in first, and proposes reduced and minor regulation, then the government is less likely to take action.
This is really weird and at the same time interesting for me, because the way I saw it is that if this product came out and it was understood that it's not functioning by itself and many more things will be needed to make this function, why does the product doesn't change to meet those demands, and instead laws are created and byproducts are formed and visual language is made to make that function? So if the case is that the companies have to deal with this as much as the government does, it makes it even more strange for me that they don't deal with the product itself, but they deal with the things surrounding that product. Like the idea of just an airplane is just like, all right, we have this idea that you could fly now, but then you have all these careers that were formed, all these byproducts. So like in the custom search, we have like the luggage X-ray machine, we have the hand detector for the fabric that detects explosives, and then the machine that analyzes that fabric. We have a hand metal detector, we have a metal detector gate that we pass through, and now a new version where there's a scanner and you stand inside of it, and so on and so on. And careers were formed. You have like a passport check guy, you have the guy who, and so on and so on. So I was always thinking, when we realize, when we put a product out and we see that it doesn't function by itself and it needs many more things to help that function, why do we keep reproducing them rather than making them better? So when we put out a car, when we realize it needs a number plate, we need to put bumps in the street to control the speed, why doesn't the product change to meet these demands and health and safety issues and monitoring issues or whatever, and whatever like is the issue? And why does the law have to deal with it, and then it sends it back to design, so design creates those byproducts and the visual language and so on? And the fact that you're saying the marketing people and the business who introduce those products are as responsible as the law to deal with this, it makes me just so surprised that the product doesn't change, but things are created around it. And I don't know how to make any sense of this now.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting indeed. The example that comes up for me is the environmental. I mean, because the environmental issue is almost like the cherry on top, like the big of all the big issues, you know. So you create I talk about, the term I talk about is integrated sustainable design. So integrated sustainable design would be, in essence, could be a law that states that all environmental sustainability is the responsibility of the designers, inventors, and engineers, you know, to make it sustainable. And that the companies, like you're saying before, the companies are responsible for the entire life cycle of products. Right? So in that context, you would completely change the process of design, you know, and invention of products from what it currently is. So currently you create a product and it's just used and thrown away and you have a landfill, right? The first thing that integrated sustainable design would do, it would ban landfills and turn all landfills into resource cycling centers, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as you no longer have landfills, right, there's no such thing as a landfill, or landfills would be illegal. Oh, and by the way, it's really important to note that this would happen over about 30 years.
I don't know if it will happen because we have this thing called planned obsolescence, and it's just like such a contrast to sustainable design. And
yeah, but I mean,
function.
Whether you look at planned obsolescence or just, you know, one-time use, whatever, the problem is simply that the whole planet is going to disintegrate. I mean, we're going to use up the entire planet, you know, even in a couple even potentially one generation, you know.
Yeah.
And so we, you know, our options as people, remember, this is all about people, like law by people and the people's movement for, you know, basically the people's umbrella movement of the world is that the people need to be taking back our governments away from the corporations. Like right now, all the power is going to the big money interests and the corporate interests, and we need to change that big time, right? So in the context of young people in the world, if we continue to allow what's happening to happen, we're not going to have a planet for our children or ourselves. You know, so I think that, yeah, you could argue, well, of course, they're not going to want to do that. But I feel, in my perspective, they're going to have no choice. And the thing that's the most beneficial of all, and this is important to understand, and it relates directly back to the idea of, where did I write it? Companies want to propose the laws first and create minor regulation so that the government is less likely to create action, because that creates stability. It creates certainty, right? The most important thing for corporations, technically speaking, I'm going to write this down. Most important thing for corporations on a technical level, technical is not profit. It's actually stability. Profit is only possible with stability, right? So,
I need to grab my charger. I'm very sorry. My computer is going to die soon.
Oh, no, you can't plug it in?
Very sorry.
How long do you think we have? How long do you think we have? Are you gone already? How long? Are you there? You could try calling in too if you want.
All right, very sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. You got your computer plugged in?
Yep.
So, should I continue?
Yeah.
Okay, so the important thing to understand about profit is that profit always comes over the long term, right? You're always looking at a 5+ year projection on profit, and all planning and corporations are always happening, you know, on that timeline, typically even investments, all that is on a 3 to 5 year timeline. Investments, is 3 to 5 year timeline. So the key is that only with stability is profit even possible, right? If you don't have stability, you can't have profit. So one of the key reasons why the entire global economy is so disastrously unstable is because there's no certainty for the future, right? Like the whole global projection into the future is so unknown at this point in time in history. That is one of the main reasons why, one, that corporations want to store so much money, like more than ever before in percentage wise, is literally just being sat on. Both rich people as well as corporations are just sitting on the money, like these huge war chests, right? Because there's so much instability, they need to save more money and just sit on it to be prepared for whatever could come. And then secondly, you just have so many unknown variables happening in the world. We don't know what, the whole global economy itself has only been around in the way that we know it with free trade and the whole, internet for less than 30 years. I mean, it's less than a generation, right? So, the idea that we don't know what's going to happen in the future is one of the worst possible things for both the marketplace, the economy, and the stability of any particular corporation. So why I mention this is because the best in environmental law is broad and long term. So if you can create a single legal implementation strategy for an environmental law and implement it slowly, we're going to talk about like 30 to 50 years. This can be one of the most stabilizing applications of corporate profit. So it's like if you say that this is how much it's going to cost to make a product, right? And you can put those figures in for not just a year or 2 years or 5 years, but 100 years. And corporations can plan. Like if you look at a typical US corporation, when I talk about these 3 to 5 year timelines, right? That's not how the rest of the world works. Some of the corporations that are the most into long-term planning are the Japanese corporations. Japanese corporations don't do anything without a 100-year plan. Right? In Japan,
100 years.
It's a 100-year plan minimum. Right?
That is amazing.
Yeah. So right now, what's happening is that no one can plan ahead. Right? No one has any ability to plan for the future because the future is so unstable. And something like an environmental policy where you're banning landfills and you're recreating an entire system, if it's simple enough, right, it must be simple enough and be comprehensive enough. But you could convince corporations that this is in their best interest, right? Yes, they'll have to pay more money, but they can pass that on to the consumer, and that doesn't necessarily have to affect their profits. As long as people are willing to pay, which if it's a government law that institutes it, people have no choice but to pay for it. The whole system can function in a much more stable way, where you are putting the actual true costs of every product into the product itself, and then making sure that there's no waste.
Yeah, but this brings us back to the other example I told you. So when this happens, I wonder if the law is gonna be applied or design will fix it up. So in terms of waste, the exact example I told you with Europe laws with dealing with waste, that the companies who make a product, they have to deal with their own waste. But this is something we experienced in this decade, that it didn't actually take place and the law wasn't applied. It just formed a new business that got paid to deal with the waste. So I wonder if such law was passed tomorrow, that, for example, landfills can't exist anymore if they're illegal. Do you think perhaps design would take action and find a solution where they could keep on doing what they were doing? Or would you
Well,
think the
that's
law would
the
be
whole
applied?
concept of integrated sustainable design is to think ahead, right? So a good legal discussion like we're having right now is how do you think ahead? How do you think ahead for all contingencies? Right? So
Yeah,
that's what's not happening. It's like we're missing the mark. If you're creating a law and the corporations are easily getting out of it, then you created the wrong law, which might have been why the government and the corporations agreed to do it in the first place, since the corporations are controlling most of the governance structures. So if you have the right law, it should be able to deal with the vast majority, if not all, contingencies. So in the context of integrated sustainable design, you want to think ahead to the furthest down point. So you have you ban landfills because landfills are the end point of every single product,
mhm.
right? There's nowhere else a product can go except for a landfill, right? So if a product doesn't go to the landfill, they have two options. One, to break the law and dump it illegally, which companies do all the time. So we're not even talking about the fact that most companies are breaking the law constantly, right? So if you just leave aside, but you can enforce the law. Enforcement of the law is a whole nother topic, right? And most laws aren't enforced, and the implementation of laws many times are just enforcing existing laws, right? And regulating existing laws. So that's a whole nother part of implementation of the law, is whether or not it's even enforced. So anyone can break the law, but the law should function in a way that it is a complete law, that works. So if you target the endpoint, which are the actual landfills, then there's only two options. One, that the company breaks the law and dumps illegally, right? Dumps their waste illegally. Or two, they create a private landfill. What is a private landfill? A private landfill is a simple singular thing, and that is a storage unit.
Mhm.
Right? That's all a private landfill would be. It would be basically someone getting paid to store the waste. If that landfill went out of business, it would basically end up in the resource cycling center, right? So it's really anyone can store whatever they want to, wherever they want to, but it's still on private property, and if anyone bought that private property, eventually it would end up in the resource cycling centers anyways. So those are the only two options: either one, to store the waste, or two, to dispose of it properly according to the law.
I see. And
Yeah.
I
So
have
so
a,
law, so law in of itself is a design. So in many ways, like I call myself a social innovative entrepreneur, right? So in that context, I'm not trying to innovate as an entrepreneur for profit. I'm trying to create new social systems of innovation and implementing ways of thinking, right? So that's, for me, entrepreneurship can be a government, right? You can be a social entrepreneur, in the way that really designing laws is the same thing as designing products. So you don't really have to see that there has to be any difference between them.
mm,
So I actually kind of
they're
agree
very
with you that there
entangled, in
is
my
this
opinion.
very, very ambiguous thing about the chicken and the egg, where it's like the design of the law itself can be the creation of the product.
Very true, and that's what I'm trying to look at and try
Yeah.
to understand how this functions. But what I have in mind is that since we know like law is always one step behind technology or design or whatever you're gonna call this, I'm wondering how are they gonna catch up with this fast pace of creation when like gene therapy is gonna come out, DNA is gonna be something to be sold or bought, and with the Internet of Things coming out, and then perhaps this will make the byproducts of laws actually invisible, so you wouldn't see the sublight anymore, and you just get fined directly from your accounts because like your car told to this device that, oh, this guy just passed the red light, or like he didn't pay his parking ticket or something like that, and you don't even see it anymore. You're just gonna get fined automatically. Or like things with robots with artificial intelligence and like big data and the currency of identification, which values not yet like even like interpreted. And I was wondering how could law then catch up with the technology of nowadays, you know? And would there be a new system that needs to be created, or can we still function in the same way we're going?
Cool. Yeah. You know, my answer for that is the primary work that I do. I mean, this is basically what I do every day, and as hard as I can, usually by myself, because it's very hard to find anyone else who wants to work on this stuff, on like the big scale levels that I do. So what I like to say is that we have a 200-year-old democracy. Democracy is great. I love democracy, but the key is the evolution of democracy. How do we evolve democracy to be functional in the 21st century? So at least in the United States, right, our democracy was created in 1776, one of the original ones, and it was never created perfectly at all. And no democracy is really perfect in the way I see it. And I can go into many, many reasons why that's true. But the foundation of it is that our system is 200 years old and functions almost exactly the same. So the actual system of creating constitutional and primary laws is 200 years old, right? So creating primary laws is 200-year-old system, and this is at least in the U.S., right? Some places is a little better, a little easier, but you know, generally speaking, you're still looking at a 200-year-old democracy almost anywhere in the world. So how do we fix it? You know, what do we do to bring our democratic systems of decision making? Because really, it's all about decision making into the 21st century.
Yeah.
And I would say that technology is the most important thing, right? So, you know, basically you're doing, you know, for me, the foundation of evolving democracy is two things. One is using 21st century technology, which is primarily would be direct democracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to use human systems, which is what I would call participatory democracy. And then the old system, the old 200-year-old system, old 200-year system is representative democracy. I call this the democratic trilogy. So my proposal, or this is the first step, right? There's about a 5-step process. So evolving democracy is about a 5 to 10-step process. And the first process, step 1, is the democratic trilogy, right? Decisions should be able to be made in, days, or at least preliminary decisions. I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy, the idea that it can take years to get anything happening. I mean, there's such a huge divide between, representative democratic law, creating primary laws, and the functioning of our society. Like our society and the rate of technological innovation and what's happening is literally, at least on a monthly to quarter, let's just say at least a quarterly basis. So our society is functioning on minimally a quarterly basis. And really it's monthly. I don't think we're quite to the weekly part, but we'll get to weekly. Eventually it'll be daily. That, there will be such amazing technologies that are being introduced on like a weekly, daily basis that are literally our society is evolving at that level. But for now it's more like, a quarterly basis. But our governments are functioning on a 2 to 3 year process. I mean, it takes 2 to 3 years to really implement anything fully.
Mm-hmm.
And like our society is evolving quarterly, right?
Yeah.
So I think that just needs to change. We just need to create a democratic system where decisions are happening much faster, like bam, bam, bam. And so the way that you begin this process of implementing it, so implementation would be step 1 would be parallel governance systems. And I think you might enjoy some of this. I feel like I answered your question in
Yeah,
terms of
yeah,
what I'm doing for evolving the democratic systems and evolving, because like I know like okay, I'll say two more things on this. One is that corporations fill the vacuum, which is why they are bigger than some countries, right?
yeah. Hmm.
And then the other thing, so in that way, there's a huge role that corporations are playing in the implementation of technology and law, right? That they are basically, doing what the government is incapable of doing. Um, so that's really good. The other thing is that basically, depending on how we decide to move forward with implementing these new systems of faster decision making, that it's good to understand the bigger picture. So I'll go into it a little bit, but you can stop me if you want to. But this basically answers your question. Evolving democracy, implementation parallel governance systems. I can go over what parallel government systems are, but the foundation of law that I always tell people is this. So you have basically corporate law, which is ends up being the board decisions. Then you have contract law, written decisions. This is all voice. Then you have primary law, legislative decisions. This is primarily voice slash vote. Then you have constitutional law. This is just, you can kind of say constitutional law and primary law are the same. And then you have the highest form of law is recognition law.
Mm.
Is done by, yeah, this is just, what is it? To be executive recognition. So the most important component of all law is recognition, right? So without recognition, nothing else can follow, right?
Hmm.
And I think this is also where you would have pre-constitutional law, right? So you create the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is meaningless without recognition, right?
Hmm.
So you create that declaration that the people are, the ones who are empowered of the government. And if no one believes you or no one recognizes that, then it's meaningless and doesn't go anywhere. So if you're going to create a new country, recognition is the most important thing, right? If you're creating a new company and the same thing is true, you have to get recognition for people to agree and to buy into it. So the
Yeah.
buy-in and the recognition itself is more powerful than any other type of law. And so when I talk about parallel governance systems and creating new governance systems, experimental processes can be the most powerful application, because if they are successful and recognized, then they become the law itself.
And it's interesting you brought this up because I was like reading and watching a lot of documentaries about this, and it's mostly involved in, of course, like public relations and how to get the masses to agree upon something. And long story short, what I was reading and what I was watching was saying the decisions by masses are not made rationally. So then again, it's like really strange that you want democracy, but you can't trust an irrational masses of crowd. So how does this work is another topic, and I would love to talk more about this, but perhaps in
Well, I
another
mean,
session because it's a
I mean that
whole area. And
that's for me one of the things that's the most odd for me when talking to people is like how much disagreement there is about democracy.
mhm,
And it's like, there's really only one other option, right? And that's dictatorship. I mean, we can go back to a dictatorship and having like a lord or a king, or we can have democracy, right? Those are the only two options on the table right now. So when someone's questioning democracy,
You just ask them,
the
are
only
you
thing
up
I
for
can
it?
think is that they want to go back to a dictatorship model and having a king.
It's a good way to end the discussion,
So
I guess.
yeah, so for me, it's like democracy is not only the best option, it is never been perfected, never been utilized correctly, and we're only at the pinnacle of the evolution of democracy, that we have the most democratic society that's ever been created, and we're not even halfway to evolving democracy to be functional. Like, for me, one of the primary components of democracy is and our society is not very democratic. Like, we call it a democracy, but we're not actually functioning democratically. But one of the most important components that I ask people are like, if you do want to implement democracy, would you be willing to have equal vote with, for example, like all the Chinese, right? And it's like the whole concept that democracy ends at a random border is anti-democratic. Like, oh, on this side of the border, you have no rights, right? But on this random line that we just drew here, we have all the rights in the world and we can do whatever we want to, but everyone else is screwed. It's like, that's not democracy at all. So we've never, ever even implemented true democracy. Like, real true democracy means that everybody has equal vote. You can't take away anyone else's right to vote, period, or it's no longer democracy. And you can't draw some arbitrary line that says that people on the other side of this random arbitrary line we just draw don't have rights, but we do. So I don't feel like democracy has ever truly been implemented. The most important thing of the democratic trilogy is balance, right? That when you get into the fear of mob rule, and that of the group of the population being so stupid that they're not able to make decisions, one democratic trilogy doesn't do that, right? Direct democracy is only one component. You need to have balance between direct democracy, participatory democracy, and representative democracy. Participatory democracy, one of the reasons why it doesn't work is that it's only applicable to about 1% of the population who are willing to sit through very, very long meetings and actually hear everybody's equal voice. Representative democracy also is only applicable to about 1/10 of 1% of the population, the people who actually get elected, right? So direct democracy, the only way to get everybody's viewpoint, but again, it needs to balance with participatory representative democracy. And I think that does create a balance and will function better than just representative democracy by itself. But yeah, I think there's ways to make it work, and I agree nothing's ever perfect, but it can evolve. And this is just this first step. I could go into the second step of the democratic quadrilogy, and then getting the fourth and the fifth components all set in there. I mean, we have a long way to go.
Yeah, and I would love to continue this talks because it's been lovely talking to you. I just like to close it down with just one last question, if that's cool. I know it's been like an hour and a half. You probably have a headache and starving right now because 1:30 there. You want to have lunch. Just one last thing. So since I'm looking into, can this process be intentional? So like, could I intentionally design a thing that would create a law, or could I intentionally create a law that would design a certain thing? And you mentioned this company who had defense design creating in Iraq. I didn't completely understand it.
Halliburton.
Could you tell me more examples of this, where this process was done intentionally, where like laws were set intentionally to create a certain design, or a design was made intentionally to create a certain law?
I don't have an exact one. That'd be really easy to research for you and get that to you, so I can do that. But in the context of the general applicability, like, we are a militarized society. So anyone that ever talks about, wanting to to reduce nuclear weapons, or end war, or like peace, all that kind of stuff, the first and foremost important thing, in my perspective, is demilitarizing our society itself. Like, how do you create a society that's not based on military? And so right now our society is completely militarized. every single thing. Like the military industrial complex and the military market is by far the largest market in the world times 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it's odd because we actually don't track it. We don't track the military as its own market system. We divide it all up into all the different components that go into the military, like the oil markets and the weapons markets and all the different construction markets, all that kind of stuff. So if you look at the military industrial complex as a whole, it's probably twice as big as any other market combined. And so the power that they have to influence at least the United States government is so insane. It's like not even funny. I mean, it's really one and the same. So when they want to have the budget of the military of the United States and spending trillions of dollars on war, they're on both sides. They're on both sides of implementing these laws that create the contracts, the government contracts, so that they're able to get, and you can just look at the revolving doors. So the two things we'll look at when you look at a specific law and regulation example, so that'll be reasonably easy. And then you can also look at the revolving door of lobbyists and government officials that relate to that policy. But the easiest and simplest one to do is obviously the military-industrial complex. But obviously there's lots of other ones. And I'll write it down. Halliburton is one. And then you also have Lockheed Martin. All right, revolving door. Lockheed Martin. 44 current and former Lockheed Martin officials who are executives in Lockheed Martin and working in government institutions to oversee Lockheed Martin's applications.
Wow.
Right? Revolving door. Halliburton's probably not going to be as big. Halliburton. Anyways, there's lots of research that can be done. But the key interesting thing about Halliburton is Halliburton was owned by Cheney, right? He was the vice president.
Really? So, it was owned by Cheney.
Yeah, so that's the primary revolving door there, is that Cheney was Halliburton. He stepped down from Halliburton to become vice president. Yeah. He was basically the CEO of Halliburton and then became vice president and then gave Halliburton all the contracts to Iraq.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So that's basically an example. So we can obviously go through more details on all of that. But my question would be what the goal, the end goal, and what we want to go for, where if we want to set something up more regular, or if this is good, or you just want to maybe do some emailing and then maybe have another session sometime in the future. But what is your end goal? Is it basically just to create, are you doing a research paper or what?
The end goal is not clear at all right now. I mean, that's how we do designing goldsmiths. We never know the outcome. We're more interested in the process. And at the moment, I'm really trying to figure out where is my process going, because I need to know my outcome to be able to execute it within this 6 months time. Actually less, it's like about 5 months.
So what is besides the topic, so question mark on the topic outcome, what is the outcome as far as the project outcome? You have 6 months to do what?
That's what I mean. We don't know. We just do it, we're more interested in how the design happens. So at this moment, it's just purely research. And where but research will let me.
In 6 months, something has to happen, right? You have to turn something in, or what is it that you're doing?
Oh, so you mean in terms of the requirements of the university?
Yeah.
Oh, so all the university asks from us is dissertation. It's just an 8,000 word dissertation of what we investigated and how we did that through research and practice. So it's supposed to be a combined uh, theory of our methods that we used and describing our process. And it's more of a design thinking. That's how they describe it, rather than the making side. So what the outcome is going to be, I have no idea. But what the outcome from the university is going to be is just that 8,000 word paper.
Cool.
But it doesn't stop there, of course. Like,
Cool. Well, I'm most interested in the practice, right?
yeah,
So like, you know, the thing I'm most interested in is creating repetitive cycles of communications. You know, or communications. It's like public, open. People can connect in and just, you know, be interacting on a repetitive cycle. So whether it's like Law by People or some of these other just open, you know, community sessions where you can talk about anything. So
yeah, I would
that
love to continue that because it would be lovely to hear other people's thought about all this and have a more broader conversation with more people. It's just gonna like, I mean, any conversation with anyone is brilliant in my opinion because as I see it, even if I don't agree with that person, even if I don't find their opinion useful in any way to me, whatever it might be, it will start making me think about a certain thing or come up with a different idea of, or just by rejecting his idea, I will be forced to create my own, you know? So any conversation is productive. That's
cool.
the way I see it. So I'll be definitely up for having this sort of conversations with other people and constructing this debate further. But what my outcome is going to be, I can't tell you right now because that's going to be decided through my research. And
Yeah, well,
that this is what I'm
I'm perfectly
researching at the
happy with
moment.
that. I love the idea of focusing on the process and not worrying about the outcome. I feel like people get too outcome focused.
Not that I'm not worried. I'm definitely worried, but I just don't know what it's going to be. I'm just trying to show faith in the process. That's all I can say.
Nice, nice. Well, you know, it could be anything, you know, but I feel like bringing people together, um, in and of itself is an outcome, and seeing what comes
Oh,
out of that
definitely.
is huge. So, you know,
Definitely.
if you want to make like a weekly thing where we start inviting people to it, that would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we can do more. I mean, this time works for me. We can always choose other times. I also do the community Saturdays where I do everything on Saturdays
Mm-hmm.
because some people are more available on Saturdays that I'm trying to get set up. So I'll send you a little bit more information on some of those possibilities. The other thing I'm doing on a global level, because everything that I do is always global, is I
Mm-hmm.
use natural time cycles.
And
So
what is that?
that means that basically we have meetings at all different types of day and night because the time cycles are natural based, right? So they can happen anytime, day and night. So for example, lunar cycles, planetary cycles. So we do meetings
Oh.
on, for example, like the Mars session is coming up, the Venus session is coming up. So anyways, you can get regular cycles happening at different times that can potentially be more applicable to global society and getting out of the whole, you know,
It's very
only doing
interesting.
things when you're awake during the day. So anyways, let's plan on doing some of that. I think that'll be really great. For me, the primary outcome that I see here, you know, that I will repeat and we can play around with,
Mm-hmm.
is that design is not limited to to products and the public. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that basically design is the same whether it is law or product based. So you have social engineers and you have product engineers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, social innovators, product innovators.
It's
You know,
very true.
that is the same thing. But there's no difference in designing a law and designing a product. That they're literally the same thing.
I mean, the guy behind me here, he's interested in that, like engineering of communities, you know, like, so that's what he designs for. He's more enthusiastic to look into communities, how they function, how they're come together, you know.
Nice.
So yeah, design is very broad in the goldsmith's mentality.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, and so in the context of integrated sustainable design, it can be applicable to anything really. So
mhm.
you can create a law that creates a lot of waste, or you could create a law that reduces waste.
Yeah, and I wonder if you could perhaps create a product that could create those laws. And so at this moment, I'm really just trying to be playful, to have an informative play. Like, so today, let me just show you. Our workshop was just called cardboard and gaffer tape. So we were just meant to choose an object and then build that with cardboard and gaffer tape only. And then that was yesterday. And then today, we meant to take that object, put it within our context of interest and what we're looking into, and see how that object would start building stuff around it, or how it would change in form or function. And what I looked at was a jetpack, because I thought a jetpack is a product, a new technology that would soon be affordable. And then how is that going to start creating its own laws, and how those laws will start creating its own designs? So making wise, like it didn't get far. I'll show you. uh, so this is what this was the outcome of today.
it
It's like
looks like a it
it's a
looks like a drone.
stoplight drone, right? It's a stoplight drone. So the outcome is ridiculous, but it starts like it's a different method of thinking. It's just thinking through making. So at the moment, it's very day to day basis, but that was our last workshop, of course. And from now on, it's just intense research and intense experimentations. So we'll see how it goes, but I would love to continue these talks, and it's very interesting to involve other people in it, and I'm sure they'll bring many more sides to this discussion, and perhaps many more things that I didn't observe, and perhaps they did.
Yes, yes, I love it. Well, it sounds great to me. I look forward to learning more myself. I like the idea of thinking through making.
Yeah, and talking about making, I was thinking of like as a practice. I was like last week, I was trying to physically manifest a law to see if I could like take a law and then physically manifest that. Because since I was looking into the relationship between uh, design and law, and I saw many manifestations of the law physically, I was wondering if I could do that as a practice, but I found it extremely difficult and I kind of gave up on it. But I would love to achieve that at some point, and if I did, I'll definitely show it to you. And
Yeah. And I definitely agree with the idea that you can create a product that creates law.
yeah,
I feel like that is very, very doable, and it's very similar to what the whole EXA is doing. Like
mm,
ECSA, or in what Petco and everyone's working on.
yeah,
That they are creating a platform that can basically be a smart contract platform. So in that context, if you're creating a platform that creates contracts, you can create a platform that creates agreements, and that's basically building legal structures, right? So it's very, very doable, and that platform can be looked at as a product.
it is. In my opinion, it's a I mean, product is a bad word that I'm using to explain my point. That's why it's like perhaps a bit misunderstood. But yeah, that's my uh, how can I put it? Like the dream outcome. So when you ask me what's your outcome, like this is but I would really love to create a product that doesn't do anything by itself, but somehow it will create a law, tackle a law, or perhaps change a law. So this is what I'm hoping to be my outcome. But of course, if you talk to me in a week, depending on my research, what I'll tell you then is going to be completely different, perhaps, or perhaps I'll get closer to it. I have no idea yet, but I'll definitely give you an update on it regularly.
Nice. The other thing that I could sort of mention, I don't really want to get into it too big time, is the general idea that, you know, like if we're talking about designing,
Mm-hmm.
and we agree that design can influence law, and you can also design law to influence, you know, designs and products and other aspects of society. So it kind of goes both directions. One of the things that I'm considering is simply, if you focus on the interaction, right, of design itself, that then you're automatically creating design systems that then are influencing everything that you're talking about, like influencing law and influencing products, but it also could be influencing anything else, right? So designing new interactive modalities of communication, and also I feel like even just having people connect and talk on different time cycles would change their interaction. You know, so bringing our awareness and our intention into the actual designing of the way that we communicate, and the frequency, and the different types of time cycles that we do it on, I think could actually change and influence the design of the society itself. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing that I'm working on and playing around with, but it gets a little deeper.
I'd love to hear more about it the next time we talk. It sounds very interesting.
Cool. Awesome. Well, anyways, do you want to just do like a weekly, you know, Law by People community network session and just do it at this time? Or we could do it every other week or monthly. I mean, it doesn't have to be often, but you have what, 6 months?
Yeah. I mean, sure thing. Yeah. As far as I'll be in a situation where I could talk, I'll be happy to talk, because this year is like a whole year, just one project, so it's very personal.
And you have 6 months left?
Yeah. Actually, like it's like, yeah, 5 months actually. Because, yeah, 5 months.
Cool. And do you have documentation from the last 5 months, 6, 8, 7 months?
So we are told to create a blog to record everything about the project, every thought, and so on. But to be honest, I haven't been doing it very well. And as soon as I found the area of my interest, of what I'd like to investigate and look into, I stopped blogging it and I started researching it, because I was struggling so much to find the focus within my focus, because I think it's just such a broad area to just be able to like frame it in a certain context. And because like I just was like, we were just like trying to understand what we're looking at, and that just took us an hour and 45 minutes of talk to navigate what exactly we're talking about and what we're looking at. So to kind of narrow this down to a single point, I had to read a lot, I had to look around, and the more I looked, the broader it got, and the less I understood about it. One, because of the language of the law. Second, because I don't know the law. And third, because I don't know where is the source. I need to find the relationship of design to law. And there is some very interesting papers, of course, written by Harvard. I read the other day about these terms of conditions that you get with the Internet of Things. And there's many more papers that I need to read, and there's many more papers that I need to find to read. So I'm really struggling at the point to like kind of narrow this down to a specific interest to be able to then broaden that up to make something out of it and to go deeper to one focus. But I'm doing my best at the moment, and as soon as I get there, I'll start blogging again. I'll start writing about it again and publish it so everyone could participate and perhaps tell me about their own thoughts. But at the moment, since I feel lost myself, I don't want to I don't want to put that out because I don't think it would do good for anyone.
Cool. All right. Well, as long as you're documenting everything, even if you're not ready to put it out yet, it's good that you're documenting it. I document everything. You can see right here, I have all these notes that you can use as well for, like, it's just all here online noted.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I was just like writing mine, and that's way more organized than me.
Yeah, I'm pretty super organized. So, but anyways, I'm most interested in, putting this into practice. I have so many like interesting conceptual, like for me, I like to blur the lines between, student and school and business and hobbies and, governance and decision making and, all the corporate things. They're just like, for me, it's just all about creating systems that work. It's also all about empowering individuals and helping people with their projects. I mean, the foundation of our whole the whole network that I create, which is the community network and the Unity network, is life support. It's like supporting people's individual lives. So we do our, I'm working on getting a life support session set up where we can talk about anything that helps a person's life, right? So for you, you have your project that you're doing. So
Yeah.
Anyways, then from there, the idea of societal equity, that simply by engaging in society in any way that you're doing, that you would build value in the society, and you're building value for yourself, you're building value in the community. So if you integrate these projects that you're working on or other people are working on into the systems that I'm building for rethinking how society functions in a way that is empowering, anybody and everybody should be building value into their work that they're doing. So, connecting your work to whatever comes after it or beyond it or part of it, or, I always challenge people to consider other out-of-the-box options.
Yeah, of course. Like it goes means we're all about thinking within an interdisciplinary context. So I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. So in that context, it's for me, it's about how do you turn a project into a hobby? How do you turn a hobby into a business? How do you turn a business into a whole network, right? So yeah. Let's plan on next week again.
Yeah.
And then I'll send you everything about the Saturday sessions and some of the other planetary sessions that we could potentially do. A lot of everything that I do is all in pre-launch. It's like not really happening. It's just about getting it happen. But I love your vision and that whole idea of like designing for the purpose of designing. That whole phase that you're in right now is really cool. So it's very applicable to a lot of the things that I'm doing.
Thank you.
Yes. So yeah, I'll shoot you some emails, and I can do a little bit of research on this, but I'm very interested in how we put it into practice as well. So
that is absolutely my interest as well. But at the moment, I'm just so lost in the research that I'm finding it difficult to put it to practice. As you see, the retarded.
Yeah, so one thing that I would encourage you to do is look at like a case study approach, so documenting case studies. And a case study would be like specific research topics. So for example, we did Halliburton government, right? And then you have Lockheed Martin in the government, right? So that could be those could be two different case studies or two case study, topics, or one case study topic, right? But anyways, just getting a whole list. So you're doing all this research. If you list all the different, case studies that you're researching and just have that'll give a really good perspective and understanding about where you're going.
All right, great.
Because just having the information of what you're researching and the different case studies and how they're interacting together, over time, if you look at all of those together, you can start seeing patterns, and then you can start connecting, because like really in the end, it's not about any one case study. It's about how all of these different research topics are interacting with each other.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
encourage you to do that, and that'll help me help you and the whole 9 yards.
I'll take that from you because you look more organized than me.
Yeah. So I mean, just make a Google Doc and write down and link every single research topic that you do.
Yeah.
In the books and everything. So, anyways, good work, man. It's fun.
Thanks.
I look forward to chatting again next week and can see where it all goes.
Great. I'll let you know about all I've looked at in the next week. We'll have a better discussion, hopefully, more focused.
Nice, nice. But yeah, we're open to talking about anything on any level, since you know, the whole community network and the broader networks that I'm working on doing. It's just we're open to anything, so it's all good.
Great. And I'll think of how we could gather many people on this conversation and how could that function well.
Sure, yeah. And then most importantly is that, you know, putting it into practice, whatever you are ending up wanting to do. So that we'll have to keep pushing ourselves. It might take a couple more weeks though to figure that out.
Yeah.
Cool. But again, you know, I'll always be pushing how can it be a benefit for everybody involved? You know, how does it benefit you? You got your project, getting your stuff. How does it benefit our networks and that we're building? How does it benefit society? You know, so I'll always be pushing that side of it as well.
Yeah.
And benefiting me too. So you know, we want it to. Everyone who wants to get involved, it should somehow benefit them. All right, man. I'll gonna get going here, and we'll have a wonderful.
It was lovely to talk to you, and thank you for putting 2 hours to talk about this with me. I appreciate
man. I just love, you know, collaborating and working together. And people get so busy, man. That it's like, you know, I have plenty of things to do, but I'm not super busy. Lots and lots of responsibilities, lots and lots of work. You know, but we need more scheduled open sessions that people can be more creative in, you know?
Yeah.
Creativity. I like it. All right, man. Thanks so much. You have a good one.
Thank you.
And how do you pronounce your name? It's just
Arash?
Arash. Cool.
Arash, yeah.
All right, take care, Arash. See you later.
See you, man.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.